Welcome back, everybody. Our next guest has been through nearly every corner of grief. She's gone through cancer twice. She's also gone through a divorce and lost two children. Now she is giving out the advice that she often asked for. In her new memoir, How to Lose Everything, she includes deeply personal stories as well as takeaways for those who are experiencing loss. Today, we welcome musician Christa Couture to the show. Welcome, Christa.
Thank you so much.
Krista, we're so happy to have you here today. And we want to start with you've been through a tremendous amount of loss in your life. In fact, you have what you describe as a grief bio. So tell us what a grief bio is and why you decided that you needed one.
My grief bio became my shorthand way to give people an idea of what's in the book, but also kind of some key points in my life. And so my grief bio is cancer, amputation, death, divorce, more cancer. And, I'm being a bit glib, but I know that each of those experiences is extraordinary. As a list, they're striking. And it's just been an easy way to give people a bullet point form of the stories that I tell.
The stories that you tell are quite astounding. Before you had your daughter, you actually lost two sons. And initially, you thought in writing this book that your son Ford would have been maybe the focus of your writing this time around. So, why do you decide to share that in the book in this way?
Yeah, my son Ford had an extraordinary life. He was born with a heart defect, received a heart transplant, had multiple surgeries. And I thought when I was going to write a book, my first book, a memoir, that it would be about him and about his 14 months in hospitals and all of the complexities. But I was actually talking with my literary agent, and she was like, yeah, but first of all, that might be a really hard book for you to write. Might be a hard book to read, but let's think about what it would be like for you. And you kind of have all these other things, the grief bio, like these are also incredible experiences that are exceptional that people might be curious about. And she was right. I mean, people are curious about these experiences that I've had. I have a very visible disability and people notice that. And some people think, oh, you're the person with one leg. And some people think, oh, you're the person who lost a child, or you're the person who lost two children. And I realized there was all these kind of bits and pieces out there. And that instead of writing just about my son Ford, I wanted to kind of zoom out and talk about grief and link these stories through different experiences of grief. And instead, that was a book I really wanted to share.
What's really lovely is that throughout the book, you really try to normalize disability. And you yourself, when you were 13, you lost a leg to cancer. And then 2 years ago, you posted a series of photos of yourself pregnant that went viral. Why do you think these beautiful images resonated with so many people?
Yeah, that was unexpected. It was wild. I had wanted to make those photos public, largely for other disabled parents, other disabled people who wanted to get pregnant or were pregnant and weren't seeing themselves out in the world. And I wrote an article about representation and I thought, okay, great, this is going to be for my community. And then the photos took off and spread around the world. And I got 3,000 followers overnight. And I was like, who are these people? But it was because of those photos. And I realized it's not just people with disabilities who were craving this representation. We all want to see difference. We're all impacted by the, homogeny in media, and most of us don't feel represented. We know that some groups more than others are not represented in media. But I think that's what struck a chord with people, that they were seeing something that in some ways is extraordinary, but in others is really normal. For one thing, pregnancy, super normal. And disability is also everywhere. And so I think it just struck a chord with people in that they saw it themselves, they saw a difference, and they saw something beautiful.
And speaking of beautiful, I can't help but notice that your prosthetic leg is covered in flowers, which is definitely beautiful. But is there a deeper significance to that?
Yeah, I got the floral cover made 6 years ago. And up until that point, I mean, I'd been an amputee already 2 decades, but I'd always kept it hidden. A lot of people in my life didn't know that I only had one leg. And now there's like a neon sign pointing to it. But I'd been on the receiving end. I've been on the receiving end of kind of an incredible gift in that some friends of mine in my community ran a crowdfunding campaign to raise $25,000 to buy a kind of knee, a microprocessor knee, that is this incredible technology that's not covered by healthcare. And so there was this outpouring of support to get me this fancy robot leg, which was so moving and life-changing. And I wanted to kind of honor that event and thought, okay, I'm gonna make this visible. I'm going to let people know that I have this incredible leg. And I'd seen someone
Mm.
else with a hand painted floral leg that I thought was really beautiful, a woman in the UK. And I showed the picture to my clinic and I was like, what's the like affordable version of this? And what the technique is actually, it's a piece of fabric. I found an upholstery fabric. It's a linen print from Chintz and Company that is just laminated onto the fiberglass. So it's a really simple technique, but it turned out to be stunning and it's been transformative.
You've been through so much, and I'm sure people are listening and just being like, my gosh, I can't even imagine going through one of those things, let alone um, such an amount of grief. And yet you seem so happy. I can't imagine what it was like to write through these. So how have you gone through all these experiences and then relived them through writing and not experience bitterness or jadedness?
Well, I have my moments. I have had many bitter moments. It's interesting. I talk a bit in the book about people asking that question, kind of hearing my grief bio and saying, how are you still standing? Like, how are you okay? And in some ways, I have days where I'm not. And I certainly, in the earlier years, particularly after the deaths of my sons, had days that I was not okay, months that I was not okay. Um, and it's also because I've had access. I have had resources to have therapy. I've had family and friends who've been able to literally pick me up off the floor, feed me, and house me and help me get to the next day when things have been at their hardest. But, I wouldn't have been able to write this book any sooner in my life. Like, enough time had to pass. These experiences had to be firmly in the past so that I could look back at them. I think grief is a kind of dismantling. You fall apart when you're in loss. And writing a book is literally putting pieces together, and making something make sense. And so all of that
Mm.
crumbling had to be complete before I could think about the act of crafting a book. And so, I think it's enough time had passed that I could do that. But it had to take time. And the writing at times was emotional. There was times I had to stop, look up, look out the window, remind myself what year it is, remind myself that I was sharing
Mhm.
memories, not the present, and be gentle with myself. And then also make sure I was making clear decisions about what I was sharing and wanted to share.
You call the last part in your book a field guide for the reader. So, what are you hoping that the reader takes away from your book?
I get asked for advice a lot and I'm reluctant to give it. But I shared the field guide in a way to give my observations. If you find yourself in the dark terrain of grief, which you have and or you are or you will at least, this is what I've seen and this is what I saw through these extraordinary experiences and this is how I experienced it. Um, and I'm hoping that people either learn about how to support someone who's grieving or have an insight into these experiences if they haven't had losses like mine. But even if someone hasn't had, the loss of a leg or the loss of a child, it's still, universal. And I hope that ultimately what people take away is a sense that they are not alone.
Oh, that's a great message to end on. Christa, thank you so much for writing this book and sharing it with us today. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much.
Christa's book is entitled How to Lose Everything. It's available now. We'll be right back.